In today's episode, we are addressing a subject rarely discussed outside legal circles, yet one that has enormous consequences for fairness, safeguarding access to justice, and the institutional legitimacy. Today, we are discussing forum shopping and the jurisdictional integrity. At first glance, jurisdiction sounds technical, doesn't it? Administrative, procedural, something for lawyers and judges as well as barristers, maybe. But jurisdiction is far more than a legal technicality. Jurisdiction determines who decides, where they decide, what powers they possess, what procedures apply, what evidence is considered, what protections exist, and ultimately whether justice is capable of being delivered at all. The public often assumes that justice is simple or simply about the facts. That is, if the facts are strong enough, the outcome will be fair. But experienced practitioners understand something profoundly different. Facts matter, yes, they do. Evidence matters. Law matters. Yet, before any of those things can be considered, a more fundamental question must be answered. Who has the authority to decide? That question sits at the heart of jurisdiction. And yet, jurisdiction becomes distorted. Fairness itself becomes vulnerable. Okay. So let's discuss what is jurisdiction in the legal sense. So jurisdiction is the lawful authority to hear and determine a matter. Without jurisdiction, a court has no power. Without jurisdiction, an authority has no competence. Without jurisdiction, a decision may be vulnerable to challenge regardless of its merits. Jurisdiction, therefore, forms the foundation upon which every legal process rests. Historically, jurisdiction developed to prevent arbitrary exercise of power. The rule of law requires boundaries. Not every institution can decide every issue. Not every official can exercise every power. Not every court can hear every dispute. Authority must be defined, limited, structured, predictable. This is not bureaucracy. This is the constitutional protection, because arbitrary power is one of the oldest threats to justice. Jurisdiction exists to prevent it. So why jurisdiction matters to safeguarding? Well, many safeguarding professionals assume jurisdiction is a legal issue rather than a safeguarding issue. SafeChain rejects that distinction. Jurisdiction is a safeguarding issue. Why? Because vulnerability or vulnerable individuals are often profoundly affected by procedural location. The venue determines accessibility, participation, communication, travel requirements, support structures available, remedies, and the practical engagement during the hearing. A process that appears fair on paper may become inaccessible in practice because of jurisdictional choices. A hearing held hundreds of miles away may technically compel or comply with procedure while creating a real participation barrier or barriers. A vulnerable person may technically possess rights while lacking practical access to exercise them. This is why participation integrity requires examination of jurisdiction. The question is not simply, was the correct court selected? The question is, did jurisdiction support meaningful participation? Those are not always the same things. There is a distinction. Forum shopping. Forum shopping occurs when a party seeks a jurisdiction, venue, procedure, or forum perceived to provide a strategic advantage within the hearing itself. The term is often used negatively. However, not all forum selection is improper. Parties routinely choose lawful forums where legislation permits. Businesses do this. Commercial litigation do this. International litigation do this. The problem arises when forum selection undermines fairness. When the objective becomes procedural advantage, evidential advantage, participation disadvantage, delay, cost pressure, or tactile exhaustion, at that point, forum selection moves from legitimate strategy into a potential integrity issue. SafeChain, therefore, distinguishes between jurisdictional selection and jurisdictional manipulation. Selection seeks lawful efficiency. Manipulation seeks procedural advantage at the expense of fairness. The distinction matters enormously. So let's discuss the relationship between jurisdiction and power. Jurisdiction determines power. Not only jurisdictional or judicial power, institutional power too, administrative power, procedural power, safeguarding power. Every jurisdiction creates incentives. Every jurisdiction creates limitations. Every jurisdiction creates opportunities. The question therefore becomes, who benefits? Who benefits from the chosen forum? Who faces disadvantage? Who gains procedural leverage? Who loses practical access. Those questions are rarely asked, yet they are essential because fairness requires scrutiny not only of outcomes but of structure. The architecture matters, the pathway matters, the procedural environment matters. Justice does not emerge in isolation. It emerges from systems, and systems can amplify or reduce inequality. Jurisdictional integrity. Well, Safechain introduces the concept of jurisdictional integrity. Jurisdictional integrity asks whether the chosen forum supports fairness, participation, accessibility, transparency, evidential reliability, safeguarding, and legitimate decision-making. The focus shifts from, is the forum technically available, to is the forum operationally fair. This distinction represents a significant evolution in safeguarding governance because a technically lawful forum may still produce substantial practical barriers. Jurisdictional integrity therefore becomes a measurable governance principle. So, participation integrity and venue cannot exist if access is an illusion. A person may possess procedural rights, yet be unable to exercise them. Travel costs, childcare requirements, disability, trauma, fear, language barriers, housing instability, economic pressure, all influence participation. This is why venue matters. A venue is not merely a building, it is an access mechanism, and access is a safeguarding issue. When institutes ignore practical barriers, procedural equality becomes theoretical. Therefore, Safechain requires jurisdictional decisions to be considered and participation to be considered very carefully, not merely administrative and convenience, but it's a human right, and jurisdictional Article 6 requirements of the fairness element within Article 6. So fairness requires participation. Participation requires accessibility. Accessibility requires consideration of practical realities. The European Court of Human Rights has repeatedly emphasized that rights must be practical and effective rather than theoretical and illusionary. This principle has enormous implications because procedural access that exists only on paper may fail to satisfy meaningful participation standards. Therefore, the lesson is simple. Rights must be capable of exercise. Rights must be capable of exercise, not merely in existence. Exercise. The self-chain jurisdictional integrity standards under the self-chain seal of integrity, institutes should evaluate accessibility that the individual can realistically engage, participate, and can they participate effectively. Safeguarding requirements met. Does the forum support protection? Evidential integrity. Can evidence be presented fairly? Transparency. Can decisions be understood and challenged? Accountability. Can error be corrected? Equality. Does the forum reduce or amplify disadvantage? These questions transform jurisdiction from a procedural issue into a governance issue. Therefore, the future of jurisdiction is not only just a modern safeguarding system increasingly operating across councils, courts, healthcare, housing, financial services, financial institutes, regulators, and third sector organizations. This creates complexity, but complexity cannot become an excuse for fragmentation. The future requires integrated governance, procedural transparency, participation protection, and jurisdictional integrity. The question is no longer, can we process the case? The question is, can we deliver justice through this structure? There is a distinction. This is Silence Screams Loud Strength. I am Samantha, your host. This is Unmasking Justice. Until next time.